So we sent our son off to college, and he came home with schizophrenia.
Now our family's searching for the cure.
But in the meantime, this is how we're functioning.
I want to talk about what can happen. Father, mother, creator.
Welcome back to Functioning, everyone. My name is Wendy Cannon Gunn, and Functioning is brought to you by GTS, the End User Experts, and One Gun Entertainment. With me today on the program is always my lovely and loving husband. I call him Honey Babe, but you can call him One Gun.
And she is Wendy, but we call her Lovey around the house.
Yes.
So thank you, and welcome back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So we're excited to be here talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is the thin line.
It's a thin line between... Well, we're not talking about that. Never mind. Love and hate.
Okay, yeah.
Creativity.
Yes. That's what I get to live with. How lucky am I, right?
How bad is that, right?
Yeah. No. There is a thin line between all of that. But today we're going to focus on the thin line between creativity, genius, and schizophrenia. And as you guys know, we are in the search for a cure for schizophrenia. And so what that means for me is that probably once a quarter, I spend my time scouring the internet, looking for the latest information, the latest research and understanding around schizophrenia. And this particular day, I ran into an article by Medscape, and where it was talking about this really thin line between genius and creativity and schizophrenia, pardon me. And so I started, of course, down that rabbit hole. You guys know how the rabbit hole works, right? But the article was really interesting, and it started talking about one of my favorites, which is Einstein. And Einstein sounds like, we all know him to be one of the greatest minds of our time, right?
He was a little wild,
yeah,
to say the least.
Who didn't know how to do his hair. That was his downfall. But we all know him to be, really brilliant. Mm-hmm. But little did we know that he also was accused of several times in his life of having bits of psychosis. And I believe it was either his son or I think it was his son that actually had schizophrenia diagnosed. So Einstein was never diagnosed with schizophrenia, but he had bouts with psychosis. Then the article goes on to talk about Sir Isaac Newton and how Sir Isaac Newton was also known to have bouts of psychosis. And so by now I'm getting like, wow, my family is really walking with some of the greats here, right? So I go and tell Marvin, I tell Honey Babe excitedly. And what was your response?
Well, you kind of, yeah. So parents, they think, a lot of parents think their kids are geniuses. They're amazing. So we have that in our family, schizophrenia, no schizophrenia. Right. And I just kind of looked at her, rolled my eyes a little bit like, where's this going? So I just waited. Right,
just waited. Well, and the reality is that, again, this article, you guys know, we're looking for hope really under any rock we can find it. And I think one of the, I always tell Honey Babe that, no, this is not a movie and we can't compare our lives to movies. But there was one particular movie that Russell Crowe did, and it was on Professor Nash's life, who is, one of the amazing minds of our time, who was literally living with schizophrenia. So we do understand that really thin line. And so the article ends up by saying that even though it seems interesting that schizophrenia, in all means, should have died off a long time ago if it was just evolutionary, right? Mm-hmm. In that a lot of people with schizophrenia don't end up marrying, they don't end up procreating. That wasn't the case in my family, of course. But clearly I'm here.
We talked about this in the earlier podcast, but you go ahead. You might have to go back and listen.
But clearly I'm here. But anyways, they were saying that in theory that it shouldn't be as prevalent. And the reason that it's prevalent is that realistically, in order to have the great minds and the brilliant minds that we know, such as Sir Isaac Newton, Einstein, that it kind of does open up humans to have psychosis, right? And to have schizophrenia in that expanded thinking. Mm-hmm. So that got me really down the rabbit hole a little further, guys, and the article starts to talk about, which we're going to share that article. We're going to put it on screen for them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an article by Medscape. Yep. And the doctor goes on to talk, the scientist, I should say, which I always say scientists are my heroes, right? Ultimately, they're probably going to be the ones that'll find our way out of this thing. Mm-hmm. But so I'm always looking for the next scientist who's doing this research, and I can't wait to introduce you to a couple of amazing scientists that we've met along the way, right?
Yeah.
But the article then, and my rabbit hole then leads me to Quincy Jones and the correlation between creativity and schizophrenia. And I think that's what got your attention, right?
Yeah,
when I said, hey, Quincy, now just to be clear, Quincy doesn't have schizophrenia, but Quincy is really forthcoming with the fact that his mother does have schizophrenia. And in fact, through a really complex, journey, as many of us know, if we have family members, especially parents with schizophrenia, yeah, this is a interesting and complex path we're on. But yes. he talks about that in his Netflix series. So don't worry, I wasn't stalking him and telling tales out of school about his mother. He was really forthcoming, and the Netflix series is actually really good. So you'll want to go and spend some time listening to that because he talks a lot about that. In fact, Quincy, one day I want you to come on our podcast. Or Rashida, one of you guys, tell us about your family. Tell us about your experience. We'd love to have you.
Yes. Any family member that's experienced this from his family would be great. We also have our aspirations for other guests we won't talk about, but man, Kanye would be a great one, wouldn't he?
Oh my God, right. So let's talk about it.
So, and who else? There was one other you mentioned.
Elon, right?
Elon. Oh,
so I don't want Kanye, Elon. I want your family. Who's Kanye's family? Because I understand, you're one of ours, right? You are a schizophrenia, what are we calling ourselves? Neutralizers?
Neutralizers. Yeah, we keep it neutral, and our stories, again, we use a lot of humor with our stories only because there's humor within our realm, the world of our world of dealing with schizophrenia.
Yeah, agreed. And we're just trying to, create that space where the family members can come together, be together, and really help each other on this journey. So, so I get excited. I tell Marvin, listen, Quincy. So we watched the Quincy special a couple of times. It was that good on Netflix. And then you started doing some research then, right? What did you learn about Quincy's mom?
Oh, man. First of all, we're talking about musicians now. We're not saying that musicians have schizophrenia. I think the way we looked at it was because we kind of looked at the entertainment world, people you would know that you would never think they had this actually happening in their family, right? So I dug into it a little more. Quincy Jones' mom, Sarah Jones, was, of course, hospitalized when he was very young. And now Quincy, I just wanted to mention his full name because I look at it as this be a great boxer name, right? His name is Quincy Delight Jones Jr. That's a great name, right? A great name. But anyway, his mom was taken away from him at a very young age. I think he was right around 8 or 9. And him and his kids he's playing with, they're watching his mom being forcibly taken away. And at the time, his father was a carpenter. He actually worked for the Jones Boys, one of those black Chicago gangs. And his mom was taken again in front of him and his friends. And they mentioned later that, your mom is crazy and she's going to come back and kill you. We are mean as kids, but man, that's going low as you can go. So she's taken away. The father, they move, right? But the mom still knows where they are. She's in the hospital. She was diagnosed right away with schizophrenia. And they move, and it comes a day where, Quincy and his family, they hear some noise like in another room or something. And the dad goes, that's just your mom. Stay right here. Stay right here. So they did as they were told. And remember, in the back of their heads, when their mom is out of the hospital, she's going to kill
She's
them.
coming back to kill them.
So within that time, she eventually, I think she broke out a couple of times. Let's talk about that. So she got away a couple of times. That was one of the first times they heard the noise downstairs. And then there was another time where she saw her kids, right? She was out, she saw her kids, and she was walking toward them. I kind of describe it as a Frankenstein, and she was walking toward them with her arms out, and they ran from her thinking that their mom was going to kill
in for
her.
a hug, right? She's excited to see her family. Yeah.
But what's crazy, they ran for 7 blocks to get away from her.
They were really scared. They were afraid. Yeah. Well, and so again, we don't want to tell this story. He did a great job, which is also why I want to have Quincy on the show, because he didn't sugarcoat it. And you and I both know what this is like. And it's complex. And I love how he completely owned it. In fact, even went to as far as to say, after a lifetime of battling with this, I realized that some of my creativity, my musical genius, was cut from that same cloth that ended my mother in the hospital with schizophrenia. So he really talks about that. And one of my heroes, of course, because you think we're in this alone, and then when you see somebody as wildly successful as Quincy, of course we're never going to be able to tell the story, Quincy, as well as you. So if you wouldn't mind coming on our podcast and sharing this space with us, that would be a dream come true. But
and remember, Quincy also talked about his creativity coming from his mom. Now, she was not a musician, right?
Right, no.
And I found out that, first of all, we think that being creative is like a natural talent, right? You just have to be born with it. But I was looking at a couple studies, and they had shown that about 22% of genetic variances contribute to creativity, which makes sense when he said this came from my mom. So finding creativity characteristic genes would really help explain the individual differences in creative behaviors, providing a deeper understanding of the biological and the physiological basis of creativity.
I mean, really, that was...
And that makes sense because, I'm from a descendant of musicians, jazz artists, and a lot of my family sang in the church earlier. So that makes sense for me, right? But for somebody whose parents have never even been involved in some field of entertainment, but we'll keep it to music. Parents that have never been involved in music, all of a sudden they have these creative geniuses, and it's just shocking. And we'll get into a couple other things, but when I discovered that about Quincy, and also him publicly, Netflix speaking about it, that has to get okay usually by everybody. Most of the time, everyone in the family is comfortable with it.
His Netflix
and it's not just about schizophrenia. That's what we pulled out of the special.
No,
but
it was good.
A living legend. You need to see this.
It's called Quincy, and it's on Netflix. It was really good. Anybody would love it because it kind of it follows his life and a lot. But he was. I think he was in full disclosure, on many levels. But what when you talked about that, one thing that came to mind, I was listening to, I think it was an interview, and I'll try to find that and if somebody has it, please share it with us. But it was about John Lennon, and John Lennon would talk about his creativity, kind of how it was never his own. And many artists will tell you that, right? That they don't even know where their inspiration comes from. It kind of just comes to them, right? And that you have to be open to it. And so John Lennon, his story was, no matter what is going on, no matter what party I'm at, and this was John Lennon, the Beatles back in the day, right? No matter what's going on, when a creative message would come, he would stop what he was doing and leave the party, leave whatever situation, and go and lay it down, if you will. Is that the technical?
Yeah. Is that lay down the idea, right?
Lay down the idea, because he said he learned early on that it wasn't his own. And that if he didn't lay it down, it would leave as quickly as it came.
Oh yeah, I can totally relate. I can totally relate to that because, and you learn your lesson as, we're talking about anyone with a creative idea, but let's stay on the path of the musician. So, you learn early. I've got an idea. I'll remember that in the morning, right? You get up. It's one of the greatest ideas you've had, but you lost it. You didn't remember. Even down to, I've talked to some musicians about this now, not everyone, but even a dream can bring you a great song, a great hit, but if you don't wake up and do something with it. So in other words, how the brain works is some of us have better memories than others, right? but eventually you learn to write it down so you don't forget it. And I can completely relate to John Lennon, where I can be talking to you, looking at your face, and have a song running in my head at that same time. Now, unfortunately, my wife knows that look, and she will say to me, "Hey, where are you? Where did you go?" And I'm like,
I'll be like, I'm on stage.
she caught
somewhere.
me thinking, I'll tell her I'm on stage, or
I'm in the studio.
I'm working on a song. Or, exactly. So I thought that was great article and information that you found regarding John Lennon, which again applies to, I think, every creative musician. I just wanted to bring up, though, sometimes our minds work so fast. You told me the other day about the song. I love the group Imagine Dragons.
Okay, yes.
Right? They have a song now. This is always amazing to me. These artists that did it, still do it back in the day. They get songs done in a day.
A day.
Maybe a couple, some of them. But what was that you were talking about, the Imagine Dragons?
Yeah. Believer, which is one of their number one songs. I heard
I love that song.
And they said that was an afterthought that they just kind of threw on an album. Turns out that it was, one of their greatest hits, yeah.
Man, Imagine Dragons, I need to talk to you guys.
I know,
How
right?
did you do it?
Yeah. Well, and, back to the genius, when you hear Elon talk, Elon will tell you in a minute, he actually says, my brain's on fire. I listened to him in an interview. He said, my brain's on fire. I have so many ideas. I have so much. He goes, I just don't have enough lifetime to get it all out. I mean, this is how... kind of back to that, where does inspiration come from? Where do these ideas come from? And sometimes they come through the human in a really kind of ravishing way. But, and that's a whole nother tangent I could go on, but I won't. But what it, of course, occurs to me is the thing that always bothered me about schizophrenia, and it still bothers me, is whose voices are they?
Yes.
Like, I early on, there's actually some really good videos or, whatever. And I'm going to actually put them out here. I'll find them. Because one of them was, this is what it's like to have schizophrenia. And the person is sitting there and they're just hearing these voices from all over the place. Different voices, different people, different accents, child voices, male voices, old people voices. I mean, some sounding demonic, my son reports. And it's like, whose voices are they and where are they coming from? They're not like, oh, this is my grandma from when I was 3. Or, at least my son reports, he does not recognize these voices at all. So just back to this idea of really, what is actually happening from that kind of creative genius and schizophrenia space that we're not quite aware of yet. So.
Yeah, and just a reminder, everyone, our podcast is called Functioning, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and one of our main goals here is for you to send us your stories. We love giving you information, we love being the neutralizers, and maybe we can bring some type of calming scenario to your situation, but we'll be talking about whatever we receive from you. We'll be talking about that on the podcast, and we may be reaching out to you. We may want to have you on as a guest.
Yeah,
so just keep that in mind as we continue to talk about this.
Yeah. So realistically, why I wanted to make this a podcast, obviously there's lots to talk about, but I was particularly excited because, as you know, my son is living with schizophrenia, and I'm married to one of the greatest creators that I know. And so these are my people, right?
Yeah.
I'm pulling up for them. I want to, I don't have anything creative in me, but I love the arts and I love creativity. And in many ways, I feel like artistry and creativity is actually leading our way forward in a lot of ways. And I saw that this summer in Minnesota. You guys all know I'm from Minnesota. And as my city was literally burning, not this summer, pardon me, this summer of 2020.
Yeah.
And we were all, stunned into, and we're not going to get political at all here, but our city was burning and our hearts were torn apart. And these artists, and I always get emotional when I think about it, they're just... amongst all the burning and the rubble buildings, you'd see these little artists that were just leading us out of the rubble.
Oh, yeah. If you saw a boarded up building, some type of graphic artist was creating a design, outside of, leave us alone. Right. Don't damage our establishment. But of course, the artists came through, didn't they?
But they were literally just healing us. but some of them ultimately got paid, because I think all of us realized that this was the healing that we needed. But before they were paid, before we even knew their names, they were just writing messages of love and healing to just move us from that place. And so I always say artists know the answer, and we should follow them, because they're probably going to get us wherever we need to go creatively.
And remember, music is universal.
Yeah.
If you don't hear any words, you can understand music. Now, how many languages can you, cross into that mix, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, can I tell about when we were in Italy this last summer, and, people that look like us were not in this part of Italy, okay? We were so far up in the Dolomiti Mountains. There's the Dolomites, anyways.
Yep.
And there was a music festival, and the guy at the hotel told us, "Oh, you're not gonna like the music. You won't understand."
Yeah, it was a parade and a festival, right?
And we were like, "No, we like music. We'll go see any music." And so we're sitting there, and this is for my peeps, so you guys can really appreciate it. We're sitting there, completely far from home. He's right. The music is, for the most part, completely. These aren't songs that we know, right?
Right.
But all of a sudden, what does the band start playing?
One of your favorites?
Ozzy Osbourne, Crazy Train.
So in our podcast, the opening piece, you see us singing together. You can't hear it, but we're singing Crazy Train with the band. And I was on the side, smoking a nice stogie. So we just decided we couldn't get in front of the band. So we just decided to sit on basically the backside of where the band was and just listen to the music. And they played several songs that we recognized.
And, most of it, they were music. What is it called? Sorry, I'm so ignorant. Musical. Is it just a musical style? When they don't do the lyrics?
Instrumental, yeah.
Instrumental. So it was instrumental. But we, of course, added the words because we knew it. But the point is that even being far from home, just music, centered us and connected us to a community that people didn't look like us, were far from home, they didn't speak our language, and yet they spoke our language, right? It's funny.
Well, and okay, so still talking about music, let's go back to one of my personal experiences. Now, I've always said that once we started on this road of our goal is to heal schizophrenia, I started thinking about all the musicians I used to work with, and even my friends back in the early days of my early days. I'm from Milwaukee, and my early days of the band called Crude Seduction. You want to hear about this?
Yes, tell us about that.
You ready for that?
They're gonna love it. Yeah.
Well, long story short, first of all, I know there'll be a few people out there, I hope they listen to the podcast, but if they hear Crude Seduction, we were in that group of, upcoming musicians in the local music scene back in Milwaukee, back in the day. I'm not going to even bring up the year. Back in the day, we'll say. And we had a guy, this guy named Joey, that played guitar. We had a 4-piece band, and he played guitar. And remember Joey? And we would go. We rehearsed at his house. He lived up in the attic, like an unfinished part of the house. This is, and we always wondered, like, what's wrong with this guy? But what would overshadow that was the way he played the guitar. And on top of that, he played the guitar with long fingernails. I'll never forget that. It's just something I've never seen before. But as we rehearsed up in his attic, we'd be playing, and periodically he would always go over and look out the window that oversaw the garage. And we would see that on several rehearsals, right? So, and he would never say anything. He just look. He'd kind of mumble something sometimes, and then he'd come back and we'd practice. But one time in particular, he looked outside and he spoke up. And he basically said, "It's Prince outside in a green Pinto, and he's stealing my licks." And he said, if he wants some, he's going to get some. He went in the corner. We weren't rehearsing. He just went in the corner and went off. I mean, one of these little tiny amps, it sounds like it's coming out of a mini stereo box or something. But he just went and killed it, and he just said, okay, I hope he caught those. And to this day, we always say, what do we say? Earlier we'd say, hey, that person is crazy. He or she is crazy. But to this day I realize, and of course we are not doctors. We never say we are doctors. We're just, again, we're trying to be neutralizers to bring schizophrenia to the forefront of finding a cure.
Right.
So I still feel like that to this day, I feel like those were signs of schizophrenia. He never hurt anyone, but he was hurt based on his, his mental instability. Yeah. So that was
and a sweet guy,
amazing
right?
person. Oh,
man,
and she had met Joey.
Oh man, remember the bowling?
The bowl. I was going to bring that up. You go ahead.
Remember it was me, you, and
Joey.
Yeah,
was it?
I think Tony Christian was there.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if you want to put his name out there, but we were all bowling.
You already did.
Oh, sorry.
They didn't catch it. Yeah, they didn't catch it. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. So we would go bowling. These guys were bowlers, just crazy, right? We would bowl all the time, and he couldn't get that strike, so he just got convinced.
You know that bowl where you always have that one pin standing up? Right. So, and then it happened to all of us for a while.
Right.
So what did he say?
Yeah. So he just started looking at the guy like, I think he's got a button up there. He's holding that one pin up for us. It was just so funny.
And we weren't in competition. We're having fun. Why would a guy push a button to hold all our pins up?
So that's our joke every time we can't get our strike. We're like, it's that guy up there holding the button. But he was a sweetie, right? And he did. He ended up getting hurt, right? Yeah. Are you going to tell him about that?
Yeah. Eventually, I mean, he had moved out to California with his brother. He kind of followed his older brother around and lived with him. But later on, I found out he ended up trying to cross a 7 or 8 lane, something like that, highway, coming and going, and lost both of his legs from the knees down. Yeah. I never saw him in that condition. I did talk to him after that, and then soon after he passed away. And I never knew. I didn't have that connection with him in the end. And he lived in California, so if I went out there and if he had a phone, you can reach, catch up with him, I would. But after a while, the relationship kind of died out, and I felt really bad. And I always kept in touch with the bass player from Crude Seduction, who would always know everyone's story. We're not all together anymore, but he knows what everyone's doing. The drummer, he told me when Joey had passed. Yeah, he was kind of like that centerpiece.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, okay, Joey, we're still thinking about you, buddy.
Oh, yeah, he's killing it up there. He's killing it.
Prince is probably, they're probably up there playing together.
Well, maybe they've met by now.
Probably.
Mm-hmm. So over there.
The other thing I want to talk about, just one of these, I know, right, over there, one of these pieces that I wanted to bring in, and really that's why I wanted to bring you to this conversation specifically, not just around the schizophrenia, but also about creativity, was the one time that I actually got witness to creativity in action, and that was, do you mind if I tell them about New York?
Go ahead.
That was so funny. So for those of you guys know, I do a lot of traveling, and I happened to be traveling to a hotel. I got really excited because I thought, I'm going to be able to stay at the Waldorf, right? And so I was excited and got to the Waldorf at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and yeah, guess what? I think the Waldorf might be haunted because I got in really late.
Well, what happened?
This was the old Waldorf, by the way. Apparently there's 2, and I didn't know that, right?
The creaks and the cracks.
I'm at the old Waldorf. And so I get in, it's late at night, 1 in the morning, and I get to this hotel, and imagine, what's the red room?
The Shining.
The Shining.
Red room.
So I get to the hotel, and I get to the elevator, and it opens up, ding, and I'm like, uh-oh. And it's just old world, and all of that starts getting me like, ooh, right? Mm-hmm. And literally that was a sound that was going, as you're going up the elevator, you heard, ooh. I'm like,
oh, like the wind.
Right, yes. Because, there's apparently it's under the old subway runs under the old Waldorf.
So a lot of air,
so it's
noise.
Literally making that noise, guys. It's not in my head, right? That's not my schizophrenia acting up. It's real. And so we get to the 6th floor, of course, 6, and I'm walking down the hallway, and I pass room 665. They don't have room 666. I'm in room 667. And I'm like, okay, that's it. So I call Honey Babe, and I said, I'm afraid, and what kind of adult woman, professional, can I be to go downstairs and tell these people I got to check out because I'm too afraid to be in their hotel, right? Mm-hmm. So he goes, don't worry, just stay with me on the phone, put me on speaker, and I'll stay with you. Is this guy amazing or what?
And I kind of forgot she was on speaker, so I was just recording.
Right.
And I always say that we all have voices in our head. Now, believe me or not, but just think about it. We always have one head has to make the decision, but I always say there's a voice to our left saying don't do this, a voice to our right saying do it, and the voice in the middle having to be the reasoning mind of it all. So I think that when you talk about it, like, where are the voices coming from?
Yeah.
I think, of course, it's especially when you get to evil voices and things that aren't giving you good direction. But, I think that a lot of that lives in us. What makes it surface more in someone with schizophrenia is why we're trying to find the cure.
Yeah,
we don't know.
Got to find out. There's some great scientists right now that's in a lab working on it for us.
That's right. We're going to find them.
And we're going to pull up for him too,
That's
or her,
right.
because there's a couple of really good females out there. But so anyways, as I'm listening and I'm trying to go to bed, as I'm sleeping with one eye open in my haunted hotel room, all of a sudden I hear this conversation, this beautiful conversation between one gun and, I guess, whatever you call it, the creator of all things,
That's
the
right.
deliverer of creativity.
There's always someone to talk to, even if you're alone. Okay?
So all of a sudden I heard him going, okay, yeah, oh, okay. And I just heard him responding, and I was thinking to myself right before I went to sleep, who is he talking to, right? Like, just this beautiful collaboration of, no, not this, yes, but this. And anyway, so that was my favorite story of listening to creativity in action. Again, being somebody that has zero creativity, it's always impressive to me to be around that.
But gaining creativity, right?
Well,
think
I know how
so.
to implement. Boring.
Well, okay, so I got another creativity story. We never talked about the Prince story. We haven't talked about that yet.
Yes, please tell him
so-
that. Oh my gosh. that's
Yes,
amazing.
creative genius, going off the beaten path of schizophrenia, but just how the mind works, right? And I had worked with Prince and was on his label with a group called Maserati. But during that time, there was a song that came up that had some very interesting characteristics to it called Kiss. I worked with Prince on Kiss. Still waiting for my Grammy. But
But we are getting checks, which I do appreciate to this
well,
day.
don't give it all away. But remember, and I think you talked about this story more than me, where he had the struggle with leaving or keeping a bass line on the song Kiss. As we know, in the end, Kiss does not have a bass line. It was literally unheard at that time, unless maybe you were doing, I don't know, something more individualized to just an instrumental. But it didn't have a bass line. He fought with the label on that.
Yeah, and I tell you, coming from Minneapolis, and you guys know, we watched Prince's career from when he was a kid, right? We were all kids at that time. But, we're always seeing artists, kind of wrestle with business-minded people to keep their creative creative rights or creative passage. And again,
Intellectual property, we can call it.
right. Or they know the path forward, but guess what? The path forward is an uncharted path for a lot of people. And, people don't like to take those risks when it comes to money or just, career, whatever. And so we watched that battle, right, as his fans and as Minnesotans, as he's walking around with, slave on his face and just, as he's fighting, and here it turns out that he was fighting for creative, freedom. Anybody would be hard pressed to say Prince wasn't a musical genius. And yet even he, in his genius musical place, had to consistently fight for the right to do that. And it turns out that once again, was he 100% right? Kiss was
One of his greatest hits,
Greatest
one of
hit
my
ever.
greatest hits, and
Yeah.
I'm still enjoying it to this day. So.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, back to, I think at the end of the day, the reason why I wanted to do this podcast is the idea that, we're looking for a cure for schizophrenia because we know that people that live with schizophrenia in many ways are hurting. Okay. Yeah. They're really hurting. It's hard. They're having a hard experience here. But we also, as a society, may need to expand ourselves a little bit more as well, right? Because in that schizophrenia possibility, there's also a possibility of genius. There's also a possibility of creativity, all of which is really atypical for many people like us. And so again, I'm just saying, I'm here to pull up for my artists. I'm here to pull up for my for my family with schizophrenia and as a community. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, I have one more story as we get ready to close out. But it's funny how I looked up, entertainers, basically famous people with, schizophrenia in the family. Okay. And of course, not a lot of them talk about it. We know they're not talking about it. But it seems like what I did find was, and we both found some musicians, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of fell right into my lap. And I wanted to talk about, I found one other article about the founder of Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green, the original guitar player. Yeah. He founded them in 1967. Yeah. Yep. He was committed to a mental institution and was further diagnosed with schizophrenia. And as a result, he spent, because this was in his, we talked about it in a previous podcast, how schizophrenia, on its onset, usually for males, it's like that adolescent, what do we say, about 20 to 30s. And then for females, it was usually in that 30-year-old range. How old are you again? No, just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm not.
I would never ask that. Anyway, much of the 70s and 80s, when he was, just making it with Fleetwood Mac, he spent some time institutionalized. Yeah. And later on, he was released in his family's care. And he talked about, now we don't know this world, right? But he talks about drugs that tipped Green over the edge into that, what eventually became him being diagnosed with schizophrenia. But how it came on was interesting, playing guitar. And then he discussed his experience with schizophrenia, how it started out, right? While he was basically, Fleetwood Mac was on top of the world. In his personal life, he was experiencing this spiritual change, which ended up being schizophrenia, again, in the early 70s. And how he talked about it was, he told this to the Los Angeles Times. He just started throwing things around and smashing things up. Now, we always talk about, we don't see violence, the schizophrenia and violence connected in our world. We know it exists. We will talk about that one day, but this one is very different for us, okay? He was smashing things up. He broke a car window, and he literally told the police when they came, I want to go to the hospital. Yeah. Okay, and then they said, do you feel okay going back out in the world? And he said, no, I don't feel safe anywhere else. So that type of admittance.
That's good insight.
Oh, man.
Not everybody has that.
And we always say, what would be great for someone, what would be a great guest to have is someone with schizophrenia. Now, that would be so hard, right? To say, come on our podcast and talk about your mental illness. I think for him to talk about it, again, just takes him to another level, kind of like Quincy in his conversation. But basically, he left the hospital and started playing guitar again. But he never really got back to where he was. He was a little bit older, started kind of hurting his fingers to play. But he discovered simplicity. He said, I'm going to take my life back to the basics and tried to keep it uncomplicated and, just started spending more time with his family.
Yeah, could you imagine somebody from Fleetwood Mac trying to live life simplistically? I mean, these artists are, oftentimes that's why I talk about the ravishing of the human, right? That, I don't have to tell you, right? The life that they have to give up in order to become our entertainers. And that's a whole nother episode we could talk about as well.
Yeah, we've got about 1,000 episodes coming at you, so be prepared.
Yeah, but in the meantime, I just, I ask you guys to hold up the artist, hold up the person with schizophrenia, and hold up that genius in the space that we need them. As far as we can see right now, we need them as part of the human experience. And and that all we really want to do is to heal that suffering, and if we can.
Find that cure.
Yeah. So I think that's it, right? We're in a good place.
That's enough for today.
All right, you guys. Well, thanks for joining us here on Functioning. We're looking forward to the next episode. Now, in the meantime, we want you to like, subscribe, and let us know how are you functioning.
Don't forget to share. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye now.